Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to start sharing my screen. Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Researcher Toolbox 2023, which is brought to you by Scopus and Science Direct. My name is Daneshri Murthy, and I am the consultant for Science Direct and Scopus for Sub-Saharan Africa. I'd just like to tell you where we are at in the series at the moment. So we are currently here doing the Diversity and Inclusion in Science webinar, which acknowledges the diversity, equity, and inclusion in scientific publishing. So today we have really good and interesting speakers on the line with us. I would like to introduce them both. Andre Wolf. Andre has been with Elsevier for 15 years. He started as editorial coordinator for the local language textbook program in Sao Paulo, Brazil. He moved over to editor and then publisher, running the academic editorial group at Elsevier in Brazil. He then led the project to move a team of Brazil-based editors to acquire content in English language for publication in the Elsevier global workflow. In 2015, he relocated to the US to work with engineering content together with Elsevier-owned novel platform. He then moved on to lead the social sciences major reference work program. The food sciences team then moved to the bioscience portfolio, and that includes areas from biochemistry to toxicology. And he is now the publisher for the pharma program. He holds a degree in mechanical engineering and an MBA in strategic and economic business management. And in his spare time, Andre enjoys riding his bike on the roads of the western suburbs of Boston, run with his wife, Patricia, cook, and play with their daughter, Joanna, and son, Thomas. Our second speaker is Linda Bushman. Linda is a senior acquisition editor, biomedical science and translational medicine, oncology, and artificial intelligence in biomedicine. She is based in Amsterdam, the Netherlands, and Linda has been with Elsevier for 40 years. She started her Elsevier career as a data entry typist, and Elsevier gave her the possibilities and opportunities to always adjust her work and private life. And since 15 years ago, she is a full-time acquisition editor in life sciences. She's an active member of the Elsevier Pride Committee, Elsevier Enabled team, and a coach and mentor to several students from different cultural backgrounds. She holds a degree in business management, and her hobbies are all kinds of creative activities. She started to go to study Spanish a few months ago, and she loves visiting all kinds of museums. So I'd like to welcome our speakers today. I'll stop sharing so that they can have the opportunity to share. But before I hand over to them, I'd also just like to give my colleague Christiane a chance to say hello and welcome you all to the session. And then we can hand over to the speakers.
Thank you, Daneshri. Hi, everyone. I am Christiane. I am customer consultant, just as my colleague Daneshri, but I am focused on ebooks. So I am in this project of bringing our publishers to talk to you today. Important to say that you have access to all this content that of journals and books. Of course, you have to check with your library what you have access to, but that's the publishers that will be listening today. They are the ones who really can approve or disapprove. They will tell you more how the books comes to our database that you have access to. So thank you for joining. And let's have to the session with Linda and Andre. Linda doesn't have the video access, Danishri. So yeah, thank you so much.
I'm just giving you both the co-host permissions. Can you let me know if you can share your video, Linda and Andre?
I think I can. Hope you can see and hear me. And also, can
Yes,
you
I
see
can.
the slides?
Yes, it's perfect.
Yes, Andre, we can.
Excellent. All right. So, hello, everyone. I'm very excited to be here today together with Linda and present a little bit of the work we are doing in IND with Elsevier. As said, I'm Andre, and Linda and I are going to go through the slides deck, and I hope to show you some of the exciting initiatives that we're involved with. I'm going to move to the second slide here, just go briefly over the agenda. So we're going to start off by discussing a little bit of why IND is important for Elsevier. Then talk a little bit about the role of the Elsevier IND Advisory Board. We're going to talk a little bit about our own division, Global Content Partners, that take care of all the reference books we have in Elsevier, and how diversity shows up in the makeup of our teams and our work. We're going to talk about some things that we have implemented in our workflow to improve and to track IND in a more tangible way. You're going to see some examples there. Then we're going to move into the representation and an outlook into the South African research. And then we're going to wrap the presentation up discussing a little bit of IND in the South African research pool. Linda, I think this is your slide.
Good afternoon all. So my name is Linda Busman and I'm located in the Netherlands. I've been with Elsevier for 14 years and I've seen Elsevier and also the world change so much. And today we will talk about the importance of inclusion and diversity in science. Inclusion and diversity is an extremely key issue to Elsevier. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are three interconnected values held by organizations that are working to be supportive of different groups of individuals, including people of different races, ethnicities, religions, abilities, genders, and sexual orientation. Only in combination, the true impact of inclusion and diversity emerges. Already in 2017, the Nobel Prize winner Richard Taylor said, "We tend to think about inclusion and diversity in things of racial, gender, and ethnic diversity. Those things are very important, but even as important is to have diversity in how people think." IND can significantly improve the overall performance of an organization. As it wins talent, it improves the quality of decision-making, and it increases customer insights and innovation. It also improves the image and license to operate. As said by our CEO and Inclusion and Diversity Board member, Kumsal Bayazid, as a global leader in research publishing, Elsevier can make an impact on key areas to enhance diversity and inclusion in research across gender, race, and ethnicity, and geographical dimensions, and ensure that research is conducted and reported in the most equitable and inclusive manner possible. So next slide, please. Andre, you already did that, thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
At Elsevier, we created an Inclusion and Diversity Advisory Board with the goals to work with researchers, academics, and publishers institutions to drive and promote greater gender, racial, and ethnic diversity and inclusion, as well as geographic representation. It's also to promise inclusion and diversity best practices to help foster diverse and inclusive future generations of STEM graduates. It encourages sex and gender bias-based analysis and reporting research areas, and to work with our network of stakeholders to influence and address inequality in the communities we serve, and to publish an annual report to highlight areas of progress and summarize the actions of the Inclusion and Diversity Advisory Board. Over to you, André.
Thank you. So the creation of an advisory board is a sign of public commitment with IND. Elsevier makes its efforts public and takes ownership of delivering IND or pushing IND forward through public-facing representation of its efforts. The mission of the board is clear. Elsevier is a significant participant in the research, information, and analytics landscape and strives to create a more equitable research ecosystem. And how does Elsevier actively pursue that goal? One of the ways is by sponsoring and leading key initiatives. You'll see a couple of examples on further slides in this deck. By setting standards and best practice of implementation of IND principles in research, and by influencing positively diverse representation in research. One of the examples of this is the practice that will be shown in a couple of slides in this presentation. IND is present across all areas of Elsevier. As representatives of our books business, we will describe some of the changes we implemented in our workflow to make sure we are pushing towards a fairer representation through the books we publish. One of the key initiatives Elsevier maintains is the creation of special collections containing both books, chapters, and journal articles focused on the UN SDGs. These collections of curated content are a representation, are freely available online, right? And present a set of key resources that show how science is investigating and proposing solutions to key societal challenges. It's important to notice that not only SDG number 10, reduced inequalities, are related to the subject that we were talking about, but all of these SDGs, they have a strong component that promotes inclusion and diversity. All they play a key role, and this content is freely available even if you don't sign any Elsevier products. The links are going to be in the slide that's going to be shared afterwards.
The key initiatives and progress areas at Elsevier are the improvement of diversity in editorial boards, the implementation of self-reporting gender, race, and ethnicity identifier, and the analysis of the impact of COVID-19 lockdown on women researchers. It also focuses on the integration of sex and gender diversity to advance the Sustainable Development Goals as presented by André, and the establishment of Elsevier and the Sandlik Consortium of an agreement to support authors from South Africa who wish to publish in open access. My colleague Denishri can talk more about that if needed after this presentation.
So in this slide, as we talked briefly, we acknowledge the diversity of our internal workforce as one element in this puzzle. On the left-hand side of this slide, you can see Elsevier's senior management team. This information is available publicly. You have the link there and you can see all of their bios. But I would like to highlight a couple of examples here, starting off with our CEO, Kumsal Bayazit. She is a professional that comes originally from Turkey and has had lots of roles around the world, having contact with different cultures and different geographies. And she is a strong promoter of inclusion and diversity, and she's a great example of that. Linda and I have been in the company for some time now, and we can, in firsthand, show our experience with how much Elsevier has transitioned in terms of leadership and including elements from diverse backgrounds, cultures, and geographies, which we haven't seen in the past. So I think today Elsevier is positioned in a much better place to include contributions from executives and professionals from across the world. One good example of that is our division's VP, which is Kevon Holloway. You can see a picture of her. She is the head of all books operations within Elsevier. She is from the US, but she's a very strong advocate for diverse communities within our group, research or global content partners, but also she has played several important roles within Elsevier to acknowledge and promote inclusion and diversity. As you see in the map below, Elsevier has over 9,000 employees across the world, and that's how they are distributed in terms of geography. So although you see some places with a larger number of employees, it's also important to acknowledge that, like Chris and myself, we don't necessarily live in the places that we were born. We work for Elsevier in other countries, and several of our colleagues are also from diverse backgrounds, working in different locations from where they were born. So I think Elsevier embodies the principles of inclusion and diversity by acknowledging the differences and the backgrounds that every one of our employees bring to work, and respecting those differences and perspectives, and building a richer culture internally by focusing on what everyone brings to work, not only their professional output, but also what they represent as they come in.
So both Andre and I are representatives of the global content partners, being the book division of Elsevier. And in practical terms, the global content partners of Elsevier included the inclusion and diversity statements in both their book landing pages and in the book proposal review forms. And we have indicated that proposals and books should have a use of inclusive language. We capitalize racial and ethnic terms. We report sex, gender, identity, or both in research. We use the right LGBTQ terminology and language around disability and religions and politics. All these are included in a downloadable PDF. You can click on the link and then you will find all the guidelines for this.
So as we discussed and Linda touched upon, every project of book with Elsevier starts with the author or editor filling out a standard proposal form. That proposal form basically states the aim and scope of the book and goes on to describe its content and the profile of the authors and editors. For about a year now, we've included this particular question that you see on screen. And I think the biggest value we've gotten from this question is not necessarily when we receive from the author a clear statement or inclusion and diversity, stating race and ethnicity of the editors or how they think about that in the way they put together the list of contributors or people they want to invite to contribute with that book. Not also when we are discussing sex and gender, which is very representative as well, but I think it's a key element there. Also, when authors and editors talk about career stage of the authors they're inviting to contribute with the book, and geographic distribution, which is also a key factor, right? You want to represent the best science in the world, and you have to acknowledge that good science is developed all around the world, not only in one country or another. Personally, I believe that the best value we get from this particular question is when we don't receive any answer from the author. That shows us that there is a discussion to be had. And then, as editors at Elsevier, we can return to the editors and authors and just ask them, listen, you didn't fill up this question in the form. Why is that? Well, I mean, maybe they are not familiar with the terminology or the principles, or they haven't even thought of that. Not that they ignore it, but the thing is, we want to hear from them and we want to have their commitment to improve on diversity and inclusion of researchers that they're going to invite to write the books with them. It's impressive to interact with researchers that haven't really put a lot of thought into this. And when they realize that they ended up inviting only colleagues from the same department, or mostly colleagues from the same institution, or eventually from the same country, they don't acknowledge or they don't realize how much the book could be enriched by having contributions from other parts of the world, other institutions, and other countries. Part of the role that we have, and Elsevier provides a lot of analytics tools so we can see the most relevant countries in research on a given topic. We can provide suggestions to authors and editors for them to include colleagues from other countries they wouldn't necessarily think of in first place, but where great research is published. And we encourage them to adopt this broader thought on inclusion and diversity by changing how the makeup of the list of contributors look like. This is an element that we push strongly towards, and this is an element that goes out for peer review. So the reviewers that are also diverse, we also try to get reviewers from different geographies. They can acknowledge people that they eventually know contributing to the book, and also that the book is portraying the best research that's done around the world on a given topic. So it's a simple question, but it shows the commitment and shows how we implement in practice what we are proposing in terms of inclusion and diversity. So this is how it shakes down to our particular piece of the company, and how we are pushing towards having a fairer representation through our books. Well, in this slide, we show a little bit of numbers that we can collect from our authors. So we have an internal tool that tracks affiliation for all authors that contributes with our books. To be clear, this is not just looking at lead authors or editors of book. We are talking here of every co-author that contribute with content that ended up in being published in an Elsevier book. They may be a co-author for a chapter or an author for a chapter as well. So one of the things that through our experience we understand, that we see, is that sometimes the starting point for a researcher to contribute, to start working on books with us, is by co-authoring a chapter. This is perhaps the entry point, right? There's a lower commitment. It can be an early career researcher that is starting off in a lab and helping put together one particular chapter. But then from that experience, they can move on to be a lead chapter author, or moving even further, they can become an editor or an author for a whole book. There are even further steps if they want to continue increasing their contribution with books. They can become series editors, expanding their networks, and discussing with other scientists if they want to lead individual volumes for a series or another. We have a diverse program that includes major reference works that are encyclopedias, and encyclopedias have other levels of editorial positions, like a section editor that takes care of a large number of articles, and even an editor-in-chief for an encyclopedia. I was lucky enough to sign one of my social sciences encyclopedia, which had a South African section editor that was highly productive, and I was very pleased to work with him as well. So looking at the numbers in this slide, from 2012 to 2022, Elsevier Books published content from South African authors in 830 books. Those over 2,800 authors contributed with over 2,300 chapters. It's a significant contribution, and also is in a growing pattern that we like to see. So this shows us how there is contribution for some South African authors, and we are pleased to welcome and publish that good quality research that we see. It's important also to bear in mind that it's usual for stronger connections to be made through a book, or the strong connections in research, collaborations, and partnerships, they usually show through books. So the more international collaboration there is in research in a country, it is reflected in books. So books are a good example to show how this inclusion and diversity element can play across the world in science and research. The areas where we see the largest contribution from South African researchers are number one in material sciences, number two in agriculture and biological sciences, then in close third, environmental science, and then fourth, medicine and dentistry. I had here a couple of examples of institutions from where our South African authors come from, or they're affiliated with: the University of Stellenbosch, Johannesburg, KwaZulu-Natal, and other institutions that really have great research, and we are very pleased to have authors from them. This is a slide that shows some numbers of the South African research. So on the top left-hand side, you're going to see the number of articles being published by South African researchers from 2018 to 2022. Over 158,000 articles have been published, and that represents a growth of 28.3%, while the world growth in that same period of time was 20%. So South African research grows at a faster rate. Another key indicative here is the quality of scientific research published by South African researchers. That is at 1.28 in terms of field-weighted citation impact. The overall for the world research is 1. Everything above 1 has been cited more heavily than the average. So scientific research from South Africa has a higher number of citations than other places. The number of authors in South Africa during the same period of time grew almost 25%. That is slightly below, or significantly below, the average in the world that has been 41%. I think there is a big element to be considered there, that is China. China has a significant growth in number of authors that certainly skews this calculation, but it shows that the growth in output in South Africa is in line with the number of growth in authors publishing science in South Africa. The table below, as well as the circle on top, shows the volume of publication in given scientific areas. And if we cross the areas of scientific output from South Africa, as you see below here, with the areas that we publish in our books, there's a little bit of a mismatch there. So if you think like medicine is number one for scientific output in South Africa with 24%, but it's only the fourth area of contribution of South African authors to our books. So maybe there's room for growing the number of authors in South Africa for our portfolios related to life sciences. When we move to engineering, then I think there is a closer match. Engineering, agricultural sciences, and environmental sciences are pretty well represented in our books portfolio, considering the number of contributions from South African authors. But I think if there is any place for improvement, and if you seeing this presentation are interested, maybe you can connect with us. Our emails are at the end of this presentation, and we can perhaps discuss a little bit of your possible new publications in the life sciences areas as well, right? So we welcome proposals from all you guys.
So in fact, Andre, this slide is a repetition of your former slide, so you can skip it. Gives the same numbers already given by you.
Yeah, and Linda, I think it's just really important to highlight here that considering all the countries in the world producing science, South Africa places in 29, which is fairly high if you think about the global output, right?
And also when you take the field-wide citation impact number of being 1.28, that's much higher than the average of 1. But we focus on, so we see in all places, we see a growth in output, but also in interest for and the quality of South African research. So in case you are interested to publish us, never hesitate to contact us. And there is one thing I would like to stipulate, that's the fact that acceptance of a book proposal or a book chapter is based on the age index of a researcher, of the subject, and of the global position of that editor, and not based on the decision of the publisher. Because we publish your book, but we are not not aware about the research you are doing. That's more of your peer reviewer or your book editor. And it's the same with journal articles. They are not reacted because of where you're coming from, but because of the quality of science, and that's quite often judged by peer reviewers and the editorial board of a journal, and also not by Elsevier itself. Next slide, please, Andre. So since 2013, we see an extreme growth in scholarly output by South African researchers with 94.8%. And over the period of 5 years, being 2017-2021, it grew with 32.6% to 184,000 articles with a field-wide citation index of 1.28. That's very high. And in the top 500 researchers in South Africa, 152 have an age index of more than 50. That means that their article are indexed quite often and based on how long an article has been in the field and cited. And also the numbers of authors from South Africa grew with 30% to more than 90,000 researchers. Being representative of the global content partners, we know a little bit more about the publishing of books numbers. So we are very happy to inform you that already in the first quarter of 2023 only, we signed 21 book publishing agreements with researchers from South Africa. Next, please, André. So I'd like to end this presentation with a brief update on the development of gender equity in the South African researchers pool. And women scientists have a vital part to play in scientific leaderships and contributing to Africa's development, but remains underrepresented. Only 28 of the researchers in all subject fields are women. And for that reason, Elsevier and the Elsevier Foundation support the Africa Gender Summit. The partnership between Elsevier and Portia Gender and Science, these are the founders of the Gender Summits, helps providing continuity across the regional editions of the summits and strengthen our knowledge production work. This year, the Gender Summit 2023, that's already in its 23rd edition, was held in Ghana. And the aim of the summit is to make gender equity in research and innovation the norm and to embed gender as a primary dimension of quality. Thank you so much for your attention and listening to us. I will now hand it over to Daneshri, and we can answer all your questions in case you have one.
Thank you so much, both Andre and Linda. I don't see any questions that have come through, so I'm just going to ask the audience if you have any questions for our speakers, please place them in the Q&A box. Perhaps they were focused on your presentation that they haven't had a chance to submit their questions.
Daneshri, so I don't see any questions there, but you have our email addresses if you want to send us a message directly. Also, I think the slides are going to be shared, right? So you have access to all the links and all the additional information we included there.
Yes, definitely. So the presentation is being recorded as well as it is being live streamed on our Elsevier page on Facebook. To round up today, I'd like to share my screen. Just the attendees that you do have access to your dedicated page, the Elsevier Africa Researcher Success Portal. This is the page, and I am going to put it in the chat box as well now, which is where you will find all of our upcoming webinars for the year, resources and support for librarians, and the recorded webinars. So once today's session has concluded, we will upload the recording here under recorded webinars. You will also receive a link to download a certificate of attendance for today's session. To remind you, coming up for the rest of the Researcher Toolbox series, next, we will be having a session on understanding the World University Rankings, understanding the importance of foundational content and the pillars of open science, as well as others for the rest of the year, but those are the next three. Under resources and support, you can find product training, a link to the Researcher Academy, and free downloadable guides related to publishing. As a refresher, the Researcher Academy is a free e-learning portal that you have access to, which will take you through a variety of e-learning modules from research preparation to communicating your research. So it goes through, for example, funding, research design, writing skills, technical writing skills, ethics, open science, publishing in premium journals, certified peer reviewer course, and becoming a peer reviewer. That's something that I'd like to promote today. For any researchers that's on the line today, if you would like to do these courses, it can help you to go into working with peer review and ensuring social impact and visibility. So you can access the Researcher Academy if you have a Science Direct or Scopus username and password. You simply need to sign into the portal with the same username and password, and you will get access to it. But back to the Africa Researcher Success Portal, that's under resources and support. For any librarians on the line, please remember that you have full access to the Library Connect Academy, which is certified courses for librarians. To become a certified Scopus trainer, you can also access that course and learning about research data management. And under recorded webinars, we have under publishing, this is where we will place the recording of today's webinar as well. So I'll stop there. I see a question has come through. Not sure if our speakers had a chance to review it.
So Linda, I think it goes a little bit further in your comment on the relevancy of author's age index regarding books publications. I think you're mute, Linda.
I'm reading the question to prepare myself on a good answer. Okay. Yes, it's true that we do take the age index into account. And quite often, in case an author or a researcher doesn't have a high age index yet, we quite often recommend to find another editor or maybe the professor with whom they are working to help them. And it's true. I'm convinced that having a high age index is equal to being a bit older than the young generation. So we also judge on, for example, when you publish a book on artificial intelligence, we should more focus on younger scientists. And then we track what has the scientist already published in journals. We check on these kind of numbers and not only on a good age index. It's important, but not leading to a book proposal. We might ask you to find an extra editor or help from your professor, but in case you can write a proper proposal convincing us that we should publish your book, I think you can also write a perfect book.
Linda, if I can complement here your response, I think exactly as you said, I will just share the experience with one particular project from last year. I had a postdoc submitting a proposal from Mauritius, and the proposal was sent out for peer review. And although the design of the project was perfect, as proven by the reviewers' comments, they recommended that a senior editor should be involved as well. And the postdoc that initially proposed the project was receptive to that feedback. And then she worked with me to find a well-established researcher to serve as co-editor with her. And the book went well. I mean, it's not just an experience for publishing a book, but through the book, we established this connection or working relationship between established researcher and a new researcher, a postdoc coming into an area. And this is going to be a connection that they're going to be much more fruits than that book for the future. So I think there is also the opportunity of teaming with someone that you feel like is a good peer to join this venture, not only from your own institution, but also from somewhere else around the world where we can try to mediate the connection and hopefully lead to a good experience, not only publishing, but also in terms of international collaboration.
There is one more question. Let me open my camera. There is one more question here. Where is it? Is it true that there are automatic rejections based on geographical region of the author?
No, that's not true in global book partners. We don't have an automated rejection system at all. Everything is based on the reviews of, for example, a book series editor, but we don't have an automatic and quite often we don't expose the geography of someone. So it's we don't say he's coming from that and that country. So for that reason, we also exclude that. But we never judge on the country of origin.
And Linda, I think one element that you also need to be aware, right? If we have a number of projects in our pipeline that are not yet visible to everyone, but if, for instance, I'm going to talk about pharmacology, one point that I'm starting to publish very often is like nanoscience in drug delivery. If I look at my pipeline books that are going to publish in the next 4 or 5 years, I already have 10 books there. If a new proposal comes in, it doesn't matter from whom, I have already covered the area in my program. So it's very difficult to fit yet another book there. This is not something that is going to be visible externally, but it doesn't take into consideration who is proposing that. Basically, I'm looking at what I need to provide to my readers. And with that in mind, I take a decision also on whether I can take the proposal to peer review or I will reject it because I cannot take that.
By the way, Andrea, as far as I know, you kind of like and when the authors cooperate in different regions, right? I read something about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm particularly proud of that project because I teamed basically that postdoc from Mauritius with one of the top 5 researchers in the world in that particular area, which I found it was a great experience for them. I don't really follow the day-to-day of that project, but just the fact that they're collaborating in a book, they're going to have both of their names equally displaying on the book. I think it's a win for everyone involved, and it's going to portray the science in the best possible way. So yes, I strongly encourage people to try to partner for leading book projects. And going back to one point that I mentioned previously, you may not start as a book author or book editor. You can start as collaborating in a chapter for a book and then move on from there as your career progresses. I think Linda made a clear point there. Well, I mean, it depends on how long have you been contributing to a field to have a very high age index, but there are indicators as well from an early career researcher that has making significant contributions. It's just that the science or the papers haven't matured for long enough so that they carry high number of citations. All these elements are put together when we are making the analysis of the proposal.
I just read the response of Metsari. I sincerely don't know whether I pronounce your name properly. But yes, it's very important that you are supported by an expert or a mentor in research. That always helps, like Andre already indicated himself in his former answer.
I think there is no more questions. Danishri, I'm not sure if you want to
Yes. So there aren't any more questions, and I think that the topic was very well covered. I'd like to thank both of our presenters, Andre and Linda, for the time and work that went into this presentation. It's very encouraging to see, being a South African myself, the publishing statistics of ebooks, chapters and ebooks from South African authors. It was really well covered, and I just wanted to say thank you for presenting in the Researcher Toolbox series. And definitely we will share the recording for those that could not make it. We do know we sent the invite out a bit late last week, so we do encourage you as the audience to share the presentation and recording with your colleagues. And if you have any further questions after the session, you can feel free to reach out directly to us. Christiane, would you like to say anything in closing?
Just to also thanks Andre and Linda, and thanks especially the audience for being here, for being interested. And we wish you all the best, and we wish you to see your books coming.
Absolutely. Thank you so much all for your time.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your days. Bye.
Take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye-bye.